Do you trust a product just by reading about it? Probably not. Welcome to the Donovan Digital Podcast, where we explore strategies and insights to help the AEC industry build brand awareness, spark engagement, and establish authority with their target audience. Today's topic is on building trust with architects, and I'm excited to sit down with someone I've had the pleasure of working closely with over the years, Tim Finley, owner of TFIN Building Solutions. Tim runs an architectural rep firm representing some fantastic brands like Livers Bronze, Velux, WW Glass, and many others. Tim and I first connected during the early days of the COVID pandemic. Back then, we worked together in creating a 6-part webinar series featuring the companies that Tim represented, offering AI presentations from 6 different companies. The webinar series was a huge success. We averaged around 180 architects attending each session. After that, we helped Tim on a variety of marketing initiatives. So today we're reconnecting to talk about something Tim knows inside and out: how to build lasting relationships with architects, create trust, and ultimately get products specified. So Tim, thanks so much for joining me today. Before we get into our discussion, can you tell our audience a little about yourself and TFIN Building Solutions?
Certainly. Hi, Shawn. Thanks for having me on. Your intro's spot on. You and I had connected, early into the COVID onset, but also early in the days of TFIN. We are a manufacturer's rep firm that is based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We focus on the glass and glazing specification and design elements relative to primarily Division 8 materials. If you look at our line card and the companies that we work with, we tend to be on the design-centric side of things. There's a few of our product categories that are required by code, but everything else is primarily focused on what it can do from a performance standpoint and, more importantly, an aesthetic standpoint. So if you put us in a pricing category, typically we're kind of on the high end, but with that comes a level of sophistication and advancement of what I would say is possible in glass and glazing. So TFIN has now been in business, or we've been in business now for just over 5 years. So I'm excited about that. We kind of hit that milestone of
That's an important one.
Yeah. And I've done a few of these where I've told people we don't know what we don't know, but we've learned a lot in a short 5 years. And so we're finding our way. We adapt. There's a lot of adversity, both in the products that we represent and certainly market conditions. But at the end of the day, we are considered experts as it relates to what's possible with glass and glazing. And our job is to educate the design community and project stakeholders of what's possible, make sure that it's meeting their performance requirements, aesthetic desires, and most importantly, then the budget necessities of any given project. And so we're kind of the conduit between manufacturers and the project stakeholders. And we do that by specific brand in the product categories, be it decorative handrail, structural glass walls, slope glazing, things like that. But we'll get into this, Shawn, but really we take a product consultant role and certainly want to work that to be brand specific, but recognize that there are other options out there in those categories and applications.
Well, Tim, you and I were talking before we started this, and I think you have a little bit of a unique perspective because your background was on the manufacturing, on the corporate side, getting into the repping business. And similar on my side, before I got into kind of the marketing agency side, I did corporate for 20 years. So I do think there's some specific advantages to that because you understand kind of both sides of the equation. Can you talk a little bit about that with your background? Because I think that's kind of a differentiator, I like to say, for many of those that have that experience.
Yeah, you're correct. So prior to starting TFIN and being a rep or a direct sales agent, I was all of my experience was in commercial glass on the manufacturing side. So Saint-Gobain Sage Glass, Viracon Apogee, and we manufactured the product and then had either the direct or indirect sales channels that we sold through in a given market. Obviously with Sage Glass, we were global, same with Viracon, but at the end of the day, we chase commercial projects. The great thing about having that corporate experience is you get a lot of exposure to a lot of different things. Be it running a business from all facets of people management to finance to production and ultimately customer service. And I am biased by personality, education, and experience that I've always focused on the sales/customer journey of that, knowing that we have to build something that people are expecting when they're paying for it,
Right.
and managing the process all the way through. So, yeah, very fortunate to have that corporate background, but it's not in my blood, so to speak.
Right.
And that's how I ventured off into this independent role.
Well, and I think we both have a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit, and that's what I think we enjoy doing what we do now. And which kind of led me to the kind of the first question I had is kind of what drove you to this versus where you were? Was it that fact of being kind of an entrepreneur and kind of calling your own shots, or was there something else that was part of that?
I think it's more along the lines of I've always been sales focused. So, and this may sound a little bit raw, but there always has to be a transaction. You can have the best marketing campaign, you can have the best product and the best customers, but you have to bring those things together and create a transaction. And I've always felt the chase was there in my mind, being competitive by spirit, and so the sales side was always what drove me and gets me excited. The corporate side is certainly through my career something that I really enjoyed. I got personal and professional gratification out of being a part of a big team, leading teams, contributing to the team. But after a certain amount of time, you in a certain level, once you get to that once the chase is done and you feel like you've peaked, all you can really give people is more of you and your time.
Right.
And I guess if selfishly, if I'm going to do that, I wanted the reward.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's get into our main topic here, which is really the ability to relate with architects. And I've always been impressed with your approach and the ability that you have to connect with architects. You certainly spend a lot of time with that, as that's kind of a major part of what you do. But what, in your opinion, are the key factors in building kind of these type of what I would consider strong, lasting relationships with the A&D community?
I think it always boils down to adding value in some in most all relationships, right? There's a need, there's a want, and there's an opportunity. And what I've found is that relative to my small world of glass and glazing in the commercial built environment, there's a level of sophistication and knowledge that these manufacturers or these components come with. And I can certainly navigate that and explain it or offer it in a way that adds value to a customer base. You take architects in example, they don't need to be, they're by license and education, they're required to be experts on every facet of a building, from earthwork up to final occupancy. And if you narrow that down to just glass and glazing, what I've tried to always do is have a technical aptitude with our products and offer that in a, I don't want to say consulting role, but more of a, hey, this is what I know and here's how we can help. Because it's not, although it's sales minded, when you're promoting products to architects, it's not so much a sale presentation. It's a consulting opportunity to say these are the opportunities, these are the options, these are the constraints, and it shouldn't always be focused on getting some type of sale, because it may be more general of what's possible versus project specific. And so early on, you got to be careful and conscious of how you approach that, because it's more of an education approach than it is a transaction approach.
You're almost selling yourself before you're selling the product, it sounds like, because you
I think
really,
so.
when I say selling yourself, you want to build trust, you want to be responsive, you want them to be able to, hey, I can pick up the phone and call this guy or gal and they're going to respond to me. Is that kind of a fair statement?
It is. And again, take our industry out of it. Trust and confidence in any relationship building is really
Right.
the foundation to it, right? And when
Right.
you bring a level of sincerity to that, I think that goes a long way. Um, so yeah, it's initially you're there in a professional manner, but you are demonstrating or kind of on display as to what services and value you can bring to the group.
Right. So let me ask you, if you're in it, let's say you're bringing on a new product line, or perhaps you're helping a company introduce a new product. As we
Yeah.
know, architects are typically pretty risk adverse when it comes particularly to new products, perhaps even new companies they haven't worked with. What has been your approach when you are either introducing a new company or a new product to an architect?
Well, I was fortunate to, in my career journey, if you will, started out with a company that had already been established for 30 plus years, Envirocon, that had the name brand and the pedigree. So everybody knew who Virocon was,
Right.
and you could sell or promote on the attributes that they had are and accolades they had already earned. But then you fast forward to Sage Glass. It's a new technology, old in research and development, but new to application and installation. And you really had to resonate with what's the foundation of the material, who are you buying it from, and convince people that they're not the first. And if they are in their mind, then what's the risk, and how do you plan for it? And so again, that was early in the career, got my chance to kind of validate that through technical due diligence and just I hate to say it, but hard work, right? And proof. And that proof was maybe a project a year, right? It wasn't like the faucet was completely turned on, but we had to pay attention to what we had, and we had to deliver upon what it was we were doing. You take our rep firm here in the upper Midwest, when you become a manufacturer's rep and you want to focus on glass and glazing, there's a lot of there's a ton of brands or products out there. The better ones typically already have quality and good representation. Some of the more innovative or newer technologies or product offerings are looking for reps like myself that have that level of influence and uh, what do you say, network, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so we have to be conscious in our own internal validation of, there's certain checkpoints and check the boxes that we want to go through with these manufacturers before we put our name and reputation on the line, because that's really all we have. And then
Right.
and move it forward. And so that's been eye-opening. It's been exciting. It's certainly challenging because you're starting a green field, if you're from a green field, right?
Hmm.
Of all the category of all the lines that we have, we've never signed on to an existing book of business that we just need to maintain and grow. We've kind of had to build that entire book of business and brand awareness. And so, yeah, so I guess to answer your question, it's a matter of, one, do we believe in the product? Do we have we convinced ourselves that we can convince others to use it and believe in it, and then put the tactics and approach into motion.
And I'm guessing you're leveraging at this point your relationship as well, right? Because people have come to trust you with the products that you currently rep. So whether it's a new product or a new company, I would assume there's some equity there.
I would hope so. I would like to think there is,
Yeah.
and I guess I can say there is because we've demonstrated it now in a short 5 years. We've brought some great products to market and built a good book of business through that repeat clientele and trust. And yeah. So you're right. There is equity in in myself and believing in a product and convincing people otherwise.
Right, right. Let me change gears here a little bit. As far as mistakes that you've either seen in the industry from product manufacturers when they're trying to connect with architects, is there, if you were giving advice to folks on what not to do, are there anything that you've seen over the years when folks are trying to connect and get product specified with architects?
You know, yes, absolutely. There's a lot of do's and a lot of don'ts, and we've probably seen more don'ts than than we'd like to admit. But I think it kind of boils down to understanding the audience, the timing in the project development, or the stage of where you're at. In an introduction to a product, you I've seen reps far too many times expect that there's an application waiting for that product and they're trying to sell it on that job before they even get to the technical merits and or what the product can do for a given application. I think what I've learned in 20 years of promoting to architects is that the likelihood that if you've set the table to come in and do a product introduction, the likelihood of walking out of that meeting with a project opportunity that's gonna come through fruition in the coming days is few and far between.
Right, right.
So it's the idea of reading the audience and understanding what information is needed at that time.
Yeah, that's great insight. So the ultimate goal is in your role and even employees for building product manufacturers that are working with architects is get product specified, right? I mean, that's
Yep.
that's kind of the end goal here. What moves you to that conversation, or how does that conversation happen when you're trying to go from whether it's product introduction or building a relationship to, hey, let's get this product specified in this project? What advice can you give the folks to get that final push into getting specified?
Well, again, I mean, it depends upon the product itself. Like I said before, most of the products that we represent are nice to haves on a building. They're not required by code. So I'm not going to walk into an architect's office, introduce Velux or Linnell from a slope glazing skylight application, and convince them they need to do away with asphalt roofing and put glass glazed ceiling roofs in every
Right.
building. They've got to understand the value of the access to daylight and what. So from a product promotion standpoint, yes, these are the benefits of a skylight and slope glazing application. And then if they have a project or a consideration, that's where you start moving the needle and conversation forward as to these are the design parameters to which we got to work through. And the more detailed we can get up front helps then align with not only a thorough specification, but also that it should match the drawings in addition, because I'm sure we'll get into this, but most product manufacturers would say that the specifications are not matching the drawings, or what's drawn isn't in the specification, and it's connecting those dots. And so that's what we really push for, is to make sure that if in a specific project, that we're deep in the detail and aligning those key elements.
So will you help an architect modify? I'm assuming, as most companies do, using the master format, the CSI 3-part specs.
Absolutely.
And those are kind of there'll be a template, right, that you
Yep.
have to then modify to the project. Uh, do you ultimately help architects modify those
Yeah.
templates?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's the service we offer, and whether
Yeah.
it's us or the manufacturer doing it, and again, there's no tricks or trickery, if you will, in writing a specification. To me, that's a legal binding document. The question would be, is it proprietary or non-proprietary?
Right.
Meaning, you can write a performance spec, which is
Yep.
ideal because that's ultimately driving what you're going to get on the building. But we want to be brand specific or product manufacturer specific because not all things are equal.
Right.
And so we lean that way. I would love to have every spec written sole specification. That's not realistic, especially in public and government work. So you at least then want to be in a position to say, hey, you've listed 3 manufacturers here. Of the 3, they may or may not be able to achieve what we've created here
In the performance part of the spec.
in the performance part of the spec.
Right.
Correct.
Right. And quite honestly, that's really the strategy, I think, behind writing a good spec. And particularly if your product or the company you're representing has something unique or proprietary or a performance that may be unique to them. Right. I mean,
Absolutely. You take the dynamic glass game, for example, back when there were 3 potential manufacturers of dynamic glass,
yep.
all had kind of the same capability to go from a clear to dark set point, right?
Right.
Performance wise. But there were some nuances and some technical differences that each manufacturer would try to play to their advantage. I guess what I found at the end of the day is that unless it was something completely compelling, or fundamentally different, those small little hidden specifications won't really hold up in court, so to speak,
Right.
right?
Right.
And again, to each manufacturer, you got to know your strengths and your weaknesses in that regard. And then what's the risk and or the advantage to having those? And I wouldn't position it to sell against. I would position it to say these are the challenge. So for example, if our product can do this and the competitive product can do that, what are the things that what are the differences and what should be considered at a design level?
Right.
That's, you can try to salesmanship all you want, but at the end of the day, you're not doing yourself any justice. You just need to position your strengths and not oversell the weaknesses of the competition.
Is your goal beyond getting project specs to try to get into the company's master specs? Is that always an initiative or not so
I
much?
mean, yes. I mean, that would be the ideal scenario so that you're just listed as basis of design or an approved equal on all specs that go out. But I've also, seen a change. We reference master spec. There's spec link out there.
Yep.
Some firms have their own spec writers and or a firm-wide master spec on their own. And so yeah, it's positioning within that given firm to make sure that you're there. And then what we also see in some of the opportunities out there is that we're not listed. And
Right.
they've got a menu list of manufacturers and as sales reps, it's our job that, hey, we should at minimum be an approved equal if
Right.
if you're just copy and pasting these people in. So yes,
And is that
so
a difficult that's a great point. Is that a difficult process, by the way? There's 4 or 5 of your competitors listed. You're not on that list. Now you're working, I'm assuming, with the spec writer trying to say, hey, we'd like to be on this list. We meet the performance that you've outlined here. Is,
yeah,
is that a
yeah.
difficult process or how does that work?
So I would say it's harder or more time consuming than one would think.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I don't necessarily see dedicated spec writers in every firm. 10 years ago, every firm had a spec writer.
That's
They were
right.
typically the person that we would try to communicate with and have our point of contact with in terms of new product introductions and helping with specifications. But the evolution of what I've seen in firms or architect firms is, some are really good at doing the drawings and production. Some are really good at doing the specifications. Some hire out specifications. So it's really kind of narrowing that down on an account by account basis and realizing how you can help.
Yeah, it seems like recently was working with a client and all the specs were through an independent spec writer. And he
Mhm.
represented probably, I don't know, five or six pretty good sized firms. And but I could see an upside to that as well if you had a relationship with that spec writer, because now theoretically you could get your product at least in the specs for multiple firms.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the key back to like a manufacturer's level is to have those specifications in a template that's easily editable,
Right.
right? And a good guide. And and then furthermore, making sure that the sales force is trained on what's critical to have in there, regardless of your product brand name. What are the testing standards and what are the requirements? And good manufacturers have those, some don't. And then it's like, well, okay, we spent all this time going through these drawings and developing what needs to be done. Well, if that just goes out to bid without, let's say, it might have some design criteria, but without a specification, we're not any further ahead than anybody else in terms of getting with the subcontractor to price it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think you bring up an interesting point, at least in my mind, because we've talking about the architects getting specified, but how far down the channel do you work it? So are you following up with the GC? Are you following up with the subs? I mean, how far down are you actually working to go from spec to selling the product?
We work the whole cycle. We're even, like I had said before, we're in the promotion phases far before we're ever in that specification phase. And then from specification, we all know it goes through design development, construction documents, bid documents, and out to bid. We have to follow that journey all the way through. Otherwise, we're not in position to get the order. So in our world, in my small world of glass and glazing, we are material suppliers to contract glass and glazing installers. So
Okay.
we do not bid direct to general contractors. We have to have conversations with general contractors to make sure they understand those things. But, we certainly have installers that we would want to bring to those conversations and or work within the people that they're inviting to bid. But that's a whole nother podcast topic
Right.
about
Exactly.
understanding who's your actual customer and
Yeah.
how you support and work through the rules of engagement, let's say.
Right. Yeah. And I think it would quite honestly be another great podcast, because I think that topic, and I think a lot of, whether they're independent reps or manufacturers, employees that are out there, if you're not following all the way through the channel, you're doing all this work really for naught, because it so easily can be pulled out from underneath you, right? At any level throughout the channel.
Right. And I'm so conditioned to the design, bid, build, or that process that it was kind of eye-opening to me to see how many manufacturers would offer assistance in the same way to an architect, to a general contractor, and ultimately their installing customer. And if you asked anyone within that organization, I don't know that they knew the difference between it. They just knew a live voice or
Right.
an email is asking for information and I want to give it to them. So rightfully so, there's that customer service aspect of it, but there's also the opportunity for training to say, look, if a general contractor is calling for a price and you've already bid their subcontractors, that's not good. That's I
Yeah.
would call a timeout or throw a penalty flag
That's
because
right.
that's not good business. And then, from an architectural standpoint, architects, we need to establish real budgets.
Right.
But as a material supplier, I'm only one portion of that overall cost. So we need the installation side of it as well to make sure they understand what that could be.
Right.
It sounds simple, but in those early conversations, I'm always quick to say, we need to get an installer involved, but this is a material cost that would also be subject to installation costs and construction channel markups. Because as a manufacturer, we put a price to an installer. There's phases before that price gets to the end user that if you haven't set those realistic expectations, your budget could be blown.
Right. And it's a great point. I think a lot of times, many times overlooked early on, which can be a potential issue down the road.
Yeah, and and now you've just worked all for naught
Right.
because if the project can't afford it, they can't afford it.
Right. Right. So let's switch over to back to architects, specifically the importance of education. And
Yep.
as I mentioned in the intro, how you and I actually first started working together was a series of AIA continuing education webinar presentations. What's your opinion on continuing education for architects, and how is that, or potentially is that a tool for you to either build relationships or to help get in the door with firms?
It is a tool, absolutely. Years ago in my career, we talked about lunch and learns, and one of our executives on the leadership team, I thought this was a pretty powerful statement to say, a lunch and learn is not a strategy. A lunch and learn is a tactic, right? It's a it's an executable activity, right? But with that comes the need and discipline to do. So let me take it back to that. In promotion to architects, I do believe lunch and learns and CEUs are a critical way to stay in front of the design community. I believe that it's changed, it's evolved. Certainly with we keep talking about COVID and so on, but prior to that, I felt like we could get access and we could give lunch and learns on a regular basis in an office.
Right.
There were options out there through different resources for architects to take online courses. The same course that I would deliver in person, they could self-report. And so I think, we both saw, and everyone saw, that with architects being required to get educational credits for licensing, right, that it needed to be there, but how they were accessing it, it became digital immediately.
Right. Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun and learned a lot, and I'm quite proud of what we had done early on. We did what, 5 or 6, like you
6
said,
of them. Yep.
and we had great attendance, and I felt like we used that digital component to engage the audience in terms of chatting and
Right.
questions and things like that. But I don't see that so much anymore because I feel like it just all of a sudden was like, poof, this is what everybody did. And I'm in my own inbox, I'm getting invited to CEUs nonstop, right?
Right. Yep.
And so over the past 2 years, I feel with architects coming back to the office and engaging with product vendors and so on, there is that option to come in and give a lunch and learn. And I believe it is, if you are in architectural promotion, you need to have that as one of your tools in the toolbox.
So are you saying you kind of see it swing back a little bit? Is that what you're seeing, or?
Yeah, yeah, I have. Admittedly, I am a little bit reluctant to go give a CEU lunch and learn on, again, back to like specifications. It has to be non-proprietary, which is fine. I love talking about slope glazing applications or decorative handrail, but as a business owner and time and opportunity cost, I'm going to get product specific or
Right.
brand specific.
Right.
And so the in-person lunch and learns haven't been a priority,
Mhm.
but I've looked to our manufacturers to prioritize how they can give that education to the design community, be it a digital presentation. Are they in the AIA master database. So if I'm an architect and I want to learn, I can seek out my learning credits. I have the opportunity to access that learning objective.
Sure. Well, let's roll in the continuing education into overall marketing, the role of marketing to reaching the architectural community. Again, as we spoke before, I think you do more marketing than a lot of reps that I know in the industry. You've always had a focus on that. I think probably partly because of your background on the corporate side, but you certainly have an understanding of that. How do you see the role of marketing in reaching the architectural community and what you do today?
Critical. That's where the strategy comes in, right? We as sales reps have the toolbox and we got to execute the tactics and strategy from the strategy. I look at marketing and leadership as the folks that kind of create that overarching approach, the playbook, so to speak. And with that comes deliverables. And a lot of that in today's world is digital.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be easily and immediately accessible because people don't want to wait. I would say, in my experience and in our world, we get more leads from architects going direct to the website and inquiring about information than taking the time to go to the contact us button, find the local rep, and then reach out directly. And that's okay. I mean, and that's okay. But marketing needs to help with that. We've got to be immediately available, easily accessible, and have valued content along the way. And I look at marketing as the primary function of that.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I could talk to you. You and I have talked many times in length, so I could keep going with you on this stuff. But as we try to kind of wrap this up a little bit, is there anything that we didn't talk about you think that might be of value to our audience, or perhaps any advice to reps or manufacturers out there that are really trying to connect with architects?
Yes. So from a rep and manufacturer standpoint, this is the age-old sales guy approach. What's your elevator speech?
Yes.
If you've got less than 5 minutes to explain what it is you're there for, you need to do it. And the marketing needs to support you in that. If I go to any one of our manufacturers and I say, give me 5 slides. If you had 5 minutes and 5 slides to introduce your company, what is your best 5 slides? And you'd be surprised how many people fumble to try to figure that out. Yeah. And it's pretty simple. It's who we are, what we do, how we can help. Right? And if you have that and you're armed and ready for it in a sophisticated way, that goes a long way in architectural promotion. And then I would turn the dial back to an architect and say, use us, engage us. Manufacturers, there's a reason that we have hundreds of millions of dollars invested in equipment and people to put these products out. And with that comes an artistry and a craft. In any given manufacturer, they're experts at what they do. And there's resources there that can help you so you don't have to be the expert in that. And to be honest, a lot of times that's just a cost of our sale. That's a part of our relationship building. So those folks are out there to be a resource to you. Use them, engage them, and chances are that relationship's going to last.
Yeah, great advice. Tim, thanks again for your time. I don't think we talked about where you represent, just for folks that they give you a sense for what areas that you do rep. And if anyone has interest in connecting with you or TFIN Building Solutions, how can they do that?
Sure. So we're based in Minneapolis and we cover the upper Midwest. So Minnesota and the surrounding states, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin. That's our sales territory. That's where we focus our time and attention. If people want to reach out, we're easily accessible on the web, www.tfinbuild.com. I'm very active both personally and through our company page on LinkedIn, Tim Finley. And then look me up. My email's simple, tim@tfinbuild.com. And so chances are if you look on the web, you'll find us.
Awesome. Well, with that, thanks for tuning in to the Donovan Digital Podcast, where we help you build authority, engage with your target audience, and grow your brand in the design and build environment. We'll see you next time.